to civility. Illinois Supreme Court Commission on Professionalism. The Honorable Edmond E. Chang, U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Illinois. Profiles in Professionalism Series. Laura Bagby, Communications Director, Illinois Supreme Court Commission on Professionalism.
Judge Chang, thank you for joining me today to discuss your career and journey to the bench.
Yeah, thank you. It's a privilege to have been asked.
So you were born in New York City to parents who had immigrated from Taiwan. What was your childhood like?
Yeah, well, as you can imagine, like many immigrant families, we were of modest, financial means. My father immigrated when he was 24 years old. His first job here in the United States was a busboy. And my mother immigrated when she was 22. And it is just astounding how courageous they were to just pick up, from their homelands and immigrate over to the United States. And they eventually made their way to New York City. I think it is not surprising also that they really drilled a work ethic into my sisters and into me as well. And I think many immigrant families have that principle in mind, that it's really important to take this opportunity and to work hard. So I had a paper route, when I was in middle school, and then in high school I worked at Dunkin' Donuts. Worked the midnight shifts while going to high school. Yeah, I think childhood was marked with a lot of hard work, and it's something that I'm proud of and have, it's carried with me, and I'm so indebted to my parents for instilling that in me.
So you studied aerospace engineering at the University of Michigan before attending Northwestern Law. What drew you to the legal profession?
One reason I changed paths there was I was more like forcibly shoved off it in this sense. On November 9, I believe it was, 1989. So that's my junior year fall semester in the aerospace department in Michigan. And the Berlin Wall came down on that day. And it was this wonderful moment in world history. We ran out onto South University and were like high-fiving random, classmates as if we had just won, the Final Four. Because we saw, this is incredible. It's the start of the end of communism, at least in that, part of the world. But the reality of that, as impressed upon us very quickly by the aerospace faculty and career counselors, very soon after the wall came down, they told us the aerospace industry is going to take a nosedive, financially, because if this is the end of the Cold War, there's going to be a lot of contraction, which is a diplomatic way of saying layoffs. And they were right. There were tens of thousands of aerospace engineers with PhDs and master's degrees who unfortunately were laid off. And so they told us, especially you in your junior year, that was me and my classmates, that you need to do something else. Now, if you want to try to get a master's degree, start preparing those applications, or if you thought of business school or law school. And when I heard law school, I realized that law might be a fit there. The other less concrete reason was really born out of how engineering was practiced, or at least how I perceived it was being practiced at the time. It was wonderful in terms of the science and designing the projects, analyzing the data. However, most days I would go to my cubicle, look at the test results from the prior day, start designing the next day's tests, and I barely saw anyone else or interacted with any other engineers. And so I had started thinking that I don't know if the practice of engineering, if it's practiced in this way, is something that I want to do indefinitely.
After law school, you were a law clerk for the Honorable James L. Ryan and the Honorable Marvin E. Aspen. What were those experiences like?
They were marvelous to learn from. I count my lucky stars every day that those were the first two full-time jobs that I had in the legal profession. And both Judge Ryan and Judge Aspin, really emphasized the same things. First and foremost, that as a judge, they are public servants. Right? They said it's very important to think of ourselves as public servants, not like public officials, and we are servants of the public. And that means that the number one instruction I have to you is just follow the law. And they both gave me that instruction in different ways, that just follow the law. Judge Ryan said, don't presume because of my political background. He had won a seat on the Michigan Supreme Court as a justice, as a member of the Republican Party a number of times. And he said, make no assumptions about that. I just want you to advise me on what the law and the facts demand. That's it. And Judge Aspin was very much the same way. He had been the city corporation counsel for the first Mayor Daley, which obviously in the Democratic Party, and so, but the same instruction. It's just tell me what the right thing to do is. We just really admired and respected them, for that. So because that is really what we ought to be trying to do, is just get the right answer. That's it. No preference for party or whether political or one side or the other. Also, Judge Ryan emphasized in particular, too, that there are going to be times in your professional life as a lawyer that what you have to do for your client will conflict with what your self-interest might very well be. And he said, for example, you might be thinking in the long term, I might want to either serve in government or be a judge. If you think in those terms, you will do your client a disservice at some point or another. And so you just remember, you are a fiduciary to your client, and that means a tremendous amount. And then Judge Aspin also emphasized the importance of the credibility of the federal courts, and the we have no power of the purse, we have no power of the sword. All we have is our credibility to really persuade people to follow our decisions. And so in order to preserve that independence and that credibility, we have to just apply the law, find the facts, give straight answers.
You were the youngest federal judge in the U.S. Did that present any challenges?
Yeah, and that was a while ago. I'm almost a judicial teenager now. In January 2024, it'll be 13 years on the bench, so there's certainly gray hairs now. I do believe that the relative youth at the time did cause some lawyers to treat me differently than other judges, that they would try to navigate around decisions or rulings, or do what I call Jedi mind tricks sometimes, where the Jedi mind trick of these are not the droids you're looking for. Well, it's similar, where they'll make an argument, deliver it with such confidence, hoping to, I thought, to kind of misdirect a new judge, and a youthful one at that, into their position when it was just wrong. I think there were those who tried to take advantage. I will say, luckily, I very early on got the advice from the incomparable Judge Ann Claire Williams. She had sought me out, and she said, you are relatively young. You're a lawyer of color also. And so there will be those lawyers who try to take advantage of that or see you in a different light. And so you develop your reputation now, and make sure that you're that no-nonsense judge from the start. And so took that advice to heart as well.
So you were the first Asian American Article III federal judge in Illinois and in the Seventh Circuit. Data has shown that while Asian American attorneys are the largest minority group at big law firms, they also have the highest rate of attrition. What can law firms do to better support Asian American attorneys?
Yeah, well, I think it is really important to recognize that there are still stereotypes out there of Asian American lawyers in particular, and also lawyers of color in general. And with Asian American lawyers in particular, there remains a stereotype that they can research and maybe write, but they're not skilled in terms of talking on their feet or improving or standing up to the other side if they're bearing down on them intensely. And of course that is a terribly flawed stereotype. It is also important, I think, to recognize that for Asian American lawyers and for lawyers of color, that many of the experiences that lawyers have, especially senior partners at firms, are quite alien to lawyers of color. And I'll give you an example. When I worked at a law firm my one else summer instead of New York and Chicago, fortunate enough to work for a very large firm, they had their annual retreat that summer, and they brought in lawyers from offices from all around the nation. And the annual retreat was held at a golf club on the North Shore on Lake Michigan. And I don't play golf. I played stickball growing up in New York City. That's literally a broomstick and a tennis ball, and you throw it and you try to hit it with a stick. And I could not, I couldn't straighten out my swing to play golf. And so they bussed us up there, many of the summer associates and associates, and it was like a foreign country to me. And I'll also say that as I walked down the corridors of the club, they had this wall of presidents, the presidents of the club, and every single one of them was a white male. And I noticed that, and I wondered, where in this sequence were racial minorities even allowed to step foot in that club. That evening at the dinner, one of the offices each head of the office would go up and they would give a report on how their office is doing, and usually a glowing summary of what they've accomplished. One of the office heads went up and said, you can read all about what we've done in the written materials. I'm going to tell a joke instead. So he proceeded to tell a joke, but the main character of the joke was Asian, and the punchline depended on the common perception that for Asian speakers who English is not their native language, the L's sometimes sound like R's. That was the key to the punchline. And I was stunned. The table full of the lawyers from his office, they laughed uproariously. Most of the other lawyers just were in shock, and I certainly was in shock. And so I quickly just was trying to process what just happened, and also what should I do about it. On the one hand, I thought, this is terrible. I'm going to get up, I'll throw the napkin down on the chair and storm out of here. But then I thought, wait, they drove us up here. I don't know how to get back to the city, actually. But then I also thought, I have to say that, well, wait, don't I want to try to get an offer, from the firm? So that crept in there too. So I just sat there. I did just sit there. And that evening, that week, that month, the rest of law school, and for years after that, I thought, I failed there. I really should have done something. But it also dawned on me eventually that when something like that happens, you also do have to forgive yourself at some point if you don't respond in exactly the right way, or exactly the way that you think you ought to have responded. Because if you allow that to start to bring you down, then it has in effect accomplished what these people believe. So it is important to just kind of forgive yourself on it.
Well, one of the ways that you frequently support law students in Illinois around these issues of DEI and professionalism is speaking to 1L students at Northwestern during their annual professionalism orientation, which is organized by the Commission on Professionalism as well as Northwestern. Why is it important to teach law students the principles of professionalism from the start?
Yeah, well, and first, let me thank the commission for emphasizing this. I mean, this is a relatively new thing. It's been going on for some years, but it is relatively new, and I think it is terribly, terribly important. And to do this at the start. So why the start? Well, part of it is what gets picked up by really the media and the news outlets. It tends to be lawyers behaving badly. That these are the examples of lawyers and they're engaging in conduct that is either very, very aggressive or even sanctionable. The other influence is from the entertainment industry. TV and film. For their very valid reasons, they portray lawyers in certain ways as well. And there are times where a litigator is either in trial or arguing a motion, and I'll just think, this is TV law. Like, they're practicing TV law by making certain arguments or speechifying, like they might see in TV or film. And so that influence is also ever present, and habits develop early. So it is crucial to get in at that early stage, and the commission has played that key role in doing so. And the importance of this habit and developing that credibility as a lawyer. As I said earlier, Judge Aspin reinforced that for judges, our credibility is all we have, and the same is very much true for lawyers. And judges, I knew this as a law clerk, but it really became intensified and obvious when I came onto the bench. Judges gossip with each other. We are terrible gossips. That it's when we go to lunch, we will naturally ask, like, oh, so what is your trial about, or what's the next trial about, or what's the big case you're working on, and then inevitably the discussion will turn to the lawyers on the case. And then inevitably, we will express opinions to each other about, that lawyer. And it might be, oh, that case is in great hands, with this lawyer. Or it might be, don't trust a word that lawyer says. Right? And when we have this, gossip is one way of putting it, exchanging information is the other. And so that credibility gets around the courthouse quite quickly. So a lawyer might think that, well, there are over 20 active judges and more than 10 senior judges on this court. What are the odds that I'll be in front of this judge? Again, I can burn this bridge and all will be fine. All will not be fine because we talk to one another.
Your parents immigrated to the U.S. in the 70s. As a federal judge, you've had the opportunity to swear in new U.S. citizens. What does that mean to you?
It is one of the best parts of this job. It's so inspirational to look out at the teeming masses of new citizens, and most of them had to have lived here at least 5 years. Many of them for much longer, and some decades. They have to pass, the civics test that probably, many American citizens could not pass, and they had to have taken a chance on this country. And it is such an inspiration to see those new citizens like fight for citizenship that we usually take for granted, and we ought not do that because this country really is founded on the strength of our diversity, and you can't really define what it means to be an American citizen by pointing to, as you can in other countries, like one race or religion or national origin or anything that divides us. It's instead it's ideas that unite us, like the idea of believing in freedom, believing that we are all equal. That's how you define an American. So you can't have any one group lay claim to America. And that is, it is so inspirational that we bring together this diversity of peoples and perspectives. And that's what makes our country amazing. To be able to introduce new citizens by administering the oath to them, it's a privilege.